After the latest polls in April, Trump is leading Biden by a very slim margin of less than 1%, according to The Hill. If Trump maintains his lead and wins in November, he would only be the second president in our nation's history to serve two non consecutive terms in the White House. However, with Trump's mounting legal troubles and Biden's abysmal approval ratings, the 2024 presidential race is wide open for either candidate. With all of this in mind, I'm going to create the 2024 presidential election map based solely on the most recent polling in each individual state. I will be doing the states in alphabetical order this time, and I'll show the polls as we go along. Now let's see which candidate is projected to reach 270 in the Electoral College and ultimately win the election. I'll be using 538 for my polling numbers, starting with Alabama. Trump is ahead by 20%, and he won by 25% in 2020. This isn't a surprise because it's a deep red state in the South. Now, to explain my margins, tilt states will be within a 0 to 2% margin. Lean states 2 to 7%, likely states will be 7 to 11%, and all safe states have a margin of 12% or more, so this makes Alabama a safe state for Trump. Now, the same goes for Alaska, as Trump is safely ahead by 12%, and he won here by 10% in 2020. That is not expected to change this election cycle. Now, moving along to the West Coast for Arizona, which is our first battleground state, it's expected to be one of the most closely contested states, as Biden won here by only 0.31% in 2020 and was the first Democrat to win since 1996. Trump is ahead by 4% right now. However, there was a ruling a few weeks ago that instituted a near total abortion ban in the state. This is expected to help Biden's numbers improve. Ultimately, it's going to come down to how Maricopa County votes, as around 60% of the population resides there. Now, before we continue, if you like the video so far, then giving it a like would be greatly appreciated. This helps to support independent election analysis. Next up is Arkansas. Trump is safely ahead by 32% here. The last poll was from October, but this is normal in states that are just normally not competitive. There are many states like this that don't have any recent polling data. Moving back west to California, Biden is safely ahead by 23% here. This is expected as it's a deep blue Democratic state. I wonder if California will ever change in my lifetime, though. It's the most liberal place on earth that I can think of. So what or who would it take to make California a purple state, and vice versa for the most conservative state as well? I mean, it's just an interesting thought and maybe something for a future video. In Colorado, Biden is ahead by 10%, making it a likely state. He won here by over 13% in the last election. Our next state is Connecticut. Biden is ahead by 9% here, which makes it a likely state. The last poll was in October of last year as well. We're staying on the East Coast because our next state is Delaware, which is Biden's home state. Biden won by 19% in 2020. There aren't any polls for 2024 at this time, but this isn't expected to change significantly in this election. And the same goes with DC, the District of Columbia. There haven't been any polls conducted for 2024. However, Biden won by almost 87% in 2020, so this is obviously safe for him. Now, moving south to Florida, Trump is ahead by 9% here. This had been considered a purple state in recent elections, but with changing demographics and Latino voters increasingly voting for conservatives, it's different now. And despite Trump winning Florida by less than 4% in the last election, the state is not even considered within reach for Biden in 2024. Staying in the South, next up is Georgia. Trump is ahead by 6% here. Biden's historic win in 2020 actually broke a long streak of Republican wins in Georgia. It was the first time a presidential candidate had won since Clinton in 1992. The Peach State has had a blue tilt recently, as Warnock also won the Senate runoff election, but it's currently polling as a lean state for Trump. With our next state, we have Hawaii. Now, Biden won by 30% in 2020. There aren't any updated polls here, but this is considered a strong blue state. There have been many comments about the Maui fires and how the Biden administration handled that situation. It will be very interesting to see if this has a significant impact on voters this November. Next, we have the great state of Idaho. Trump is safely ahead by 29%. This is another one that doesn't have any recent polls. The last one was done in October. Now, in Illinois, Biden is ahead by 10%. He won here by 17% in 2020, so the polls changed this from a safe to likely state for Biden. Despite the decrease, this state is not expected to be within reach for Trump in this cycle. The next 5 states are polling as very safe for Trump, so I'll go through these slightly quicker. First, we have the great state of Indiana. Go Hoosiers. Trump is up by 21% here. In Iowa, Trump is ahead by 15%. In Kansas, Trump is ahead by 14%. And in Kentucky, Trump is ahead by 28%. And in Louisiana, Trump is safely ahead by 15% here. Like most of the states before, their last poll is from September of last year, but it's another red conservative state, so no major changes are expected here. Clinton actually won Louisiana twice in the 92 and 96 elections, and he's the last Democrat to win there. Now, moving east to Maine, Biden is ahead by 8% in the 1st district, and Trump is ahead by 20% in the 2nd district. Now, staying on the East Coast, Maryland is up next, and Biden is ahead by 15% here. That's going to make that a safe state for Biden. And in Massachusetts, Biden is ahead by 30% in the latest poll from mid-April. Moving on to our next battleground state, which is Michigan. This is an extremely important state for Biden, as with current pathing, he would need to pick up Michigan and Pennsylvania to win. Now, Michigan was a key part of the Democrats' so-called blue wall in 2020. Trump, of course, will be trying his best to tear down that wall in this election. I'm going to show you the polling for Michigan, as this one has been interesting in April. When I started putting this video together, Trump was ahead by 3% in the most recent poll. Then another poll came out with Trump ahead by 15%, which would have made this a safe state for him, and I would have never expected to say that about Michigan. Now 2 other polls were posted with Biden ahead by 2%, so this is now a lean state for Biden. One thing to keep in mind, those 2 recent polls are from, you see LV here, that's likely voters. The previous ones were registered voters. Depending on where that falls for you, you may put more or less weight to it. Next up, we have Minnesota. Biden is ahead by 2%, and that's down from 8% just the month before. Democrats are expected to pick up this state, but with how close it is, Trump has the chance to take it. This state has actually voted Democratic since the 70s, and Biden cannot afford to lose this state. I mean, if Trump flips it, what does that mean? It becomes a purple state in subsequent elections? Or does this just represent how they feel about Biden and that maybe they just don't like him? Now, the next 4 states are very safe for Trump and don't have many recent polls to go off of. So first, it's Mississippi. He's ahead by 18% here. Then we have Missouri. He is up by 18% here as well. Montana, he's ahead by 20%. And then in Nebraska, Trump's ahead by 18%. There's no data for Nebraska's 2nd district, but historically it leans blue. So we'll give that to Joe Biden. Now we'll be moving west to our next battleground state of Nevada. Trump is currently ahead by 8% here, making it a likely state for him. Biden won by just over 2% in 2020, but recent data suggests that immigration and economic concerns seem to be swaying voters. If Trump wins Nevada, he'd be the first Republican to do it since Bush in 2004. Next up, we have New Hampshire. Biden is ahead by 3% here, making this a lean state. So next, I'll be doing New Jersey and New York together. Biden is actually ahead by just 5% in New Jersey, and then he's ahead by 10% in New York. Now, these are typically deep blue Democratic states, and I wonder how close these will actually get by November, because it seems that those recent high-profile scandals with Democratic leadership appears to be changing many voters. Next up, we have New Mexico. Biden is ahead by 6% here, which makes it a lean state. This is another state to pay attention to since they also have major immigration concerns, and we'll see if this ultimately sways many voters to vote conservative this November. Next up, we have another battleground state, which is North Carolina. Trump is ahead right now by only 2%, though it's often leaning Republican. North Carolina is a crucial swing state in this election because Democrats are eyeing it as a potential game changer for future elections, so we will see how it goes. Moving on to North Dakota, Trump is ahead here by 37%. Next up is Ohio. Trump is ahead by 11%. He won here by 8% in 2020. However, Ohio is not expected to change significantly this election, so we don't expect this to be up for grabs for Biden. Moving on to Oklahoma, Trump is ahead by 28%. That makes this very safe for him. Now let's head back west to Oregon. Biden is ahead by 15% here. That makes this very safe for him. And now we have another battleground state. We go back east to Pennsylvania. This is another very important battleground state worth 19 points in the Electoral College. Trump won here in 2016 by less than 1%, and Biden won in 2020 by 1.2%. This is another state that's been updated while I've been making this video, so I'll show you guys the polls. When I first started working on this video, it went from a tie that you see here where it says even. It went to Trump plus 5%, and then now Trump plus 1%. Even though it's only 1%, Trump still wins. And we will give this to Trump, and then we will move on to our next state, which is Rhode Island. Now, Biden is ahead by 17% here, making this a very safe state for him. Now, Trump and Biden are both neck and neck right now in the Electoral College points. We have 211 for Biden, and we have 209 for Trump. Let's keep going to see who takes this thing. Next up, we have South Carolina. Trump is ahead by 14% here, so that makes it safe for him. Then we shoot over to South Dakota. Trump's ahead by 29% here. That makes that it's very safe as well. Then we have Tennessee. Trump is ahead by 23% here. Next up is the great state of Texas. Trump is ahead by 12% here. Surprisingly, Trump won by only 5% in the state of Texas in 2020. So it will be interesting to see if Trump's lead continues to increase or if it'll end up closer to the last election's much tighter voting numbers. Now, with those 40 points from Texas, Trump has over 270, and that makes him our president for the 2024 election. Let's still finish the map just to see how many more he ultimately picks up and to know where it went wrong for Biden. In Utah, Trump is ahead by 8% here. That's going to make that likely. In Vermont, Biden is up by 31%, so that makes that safe. In Virginia, Biden is ahead by 6%, so that'll make that a lean state for Biden. In Washington, Biden is ahead by 11% here, that makes that likely. And in West Virginia, Trump is ahead by 37%, so that makes that safe. I'm going to do Wyoming next, and then I'll finish with Wisconsin. Because Trump is ahead by 53% here, it's no surprise. It's one of the deepest red states in the country, and they vote overwhelmingly Republican. Now, moving on to Wisconsin, which is our final state and our final battleground state, Biden won by a very tight margin of 0.63% in 2020, and Trump won by 0.76% in 2016 against Clinton. Now, there has been a lot of movement this month. Let me show you the polls on this one as well, because it's kind of similar to Pennsylvania and Michigan. Now, Biden was ahead by 2%. Then they both tied. They were both even. Then Trump by 10%, 1%, finally 4%. That's where we are now. So that means Trump wins Wisconsin, and now it's a lean state for Trump. Now that we have every state tallied, we see that Trump has a total of 295 points to Biden's 239 points. I'm really eager to see how polling changes from here on out. With Trump being in court and Biden experiencing extremely low approval ratings, who knows how this thing will go. Now, my name is Marshall, and I really appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a like. That would help tremendously. Thanks, and hopefully I'll be talking to you again soon.